My wife thought it was just a normal drive home from the grocery store, a quiet road, an empty neighborhood, nothing strange at all. Then a black SUV with fake HOA police decals cut her off and blocked the street. Two men jumped out wearing cheap tactical vests and plastic badges, routine HOA compliance stop. One of them said, "Routine? At night on an empty road?" Before she could even answer, one man grabbed her door handle and the other reached for something under his vest. They thought she was helpless. They thought she was alone. They thought she was just some frightened wife they could intimidate. But they didn't know the truth. My wife isn't just someone's wife. She's trained. She's smarter than they were. And she was carrying the one thing they never expected her to have. What happened next flipped their whole operation upside down. And when the real police arrived and recognized her, before I tell you the full story, tell me where you're watching from. And hit subscribe for more stories where the bad guys always get exactly what they deserve. Emily always said the drive home was her favorite part of the day. It was the only time she had a few quiet minutes to herself. No work emails, no neighborhood drama, no errands demanding attention. Just the soft hum of the radio, the smell of groceries in the back seat, and the fading golden light spreading across the quiet suburban streets. That evening felt no different. The sky glowed orange, the air was calm, and traffic was non-existent. She even slowed down near the pond, hoping to spot the ducks she liked watching. Everything felt safe, normal, predictable, and inside that false sense of calm, danger waited. She had just passed the old oak tree when it happened. A black SUV with a bull bar grille and dark-tinted windows came out of nowhere, racing up behind her. Before Emily could react, the SUV swerved violently, cutting in front of her so sharply that she had to slam her brakes. Her seatbelt locked across her chest, and her bags fell to the floor with a thud. The SUV stopped sideways, completely blocking the road. Emily's first thought wasn't fear, it was confusion. Nothing about the situation made sense. There were no traffic signs, no warnings, no reason for a stop. Then the SUV doors flew open. Two men got out fast, like they'd rehearsed this moment. They wore black tactical vests with cheap patches that read HOA enforcement, badges hanging from chains that swung awkwardly with each step. They didn't move like real officers. They didn't speak like real officers. They didn't even breathe like real officers. There was something desperate in the way they approached, something sloppy in the way their hands twitched near their belts. The taller one shouted, "Ma'am, stop your vehicle. This is a routine HOA compliance stop." Emily blinked, stunned. A compliance stop? At night, in the middle of a public road? She slowly reached for the window switch but stopped halfway. Her instincts, the instincts she trusted more than anything, whispered that nothing about this was routine. She looked at their uniforms again. The badges were shiny plastic. The vests were mismatched. Their patches weren't even straight. These men were actors in costumes they barely understood. She pressed the lock button. The click of the doors made both men stiffen in irritation. The taller one immediately stepped forward, grabbing her door handle hard enough to rattle the entire frame. The other walked to the front of her car and tapped his flashlight against the windshield repeatedly, like he was trying to intimidate her. Emily's heart beat faster, not from panic, but from calculation. Every detail entered her mind like pieces of a puzzle: the fake badges, the unmarked SUV, the lack of real police protocol, the aggression, the timing. They thought she was vulnerable. They thought she would obey. They thought she was just another frightened woman who would roll down her window and hand over whatever they demanded. They had no idea who she really was. Emily kept her hands visible as she watched the man outside her window. He leaned in, his breath fogging the glass, his voice turning sharper. "Ma'am, unlock your door or we will escalate this situation." Emily didn't flinch. She didn't respond. She didn't panic. She simply shifted her position slightly to the right, closer to the glove box. Slowly, silently, naturally, the man grew impatient, slamming his palm against the window. "Open the door, now." Emily stayed calm. Her breathing barely changed. Inside her mind, her training took over, the same training that taught her how to stay level-headed in pressure, how to analyze threats, how to react without hesitation. She scanned their hands. No real firearms, no radios, no badge numbers, no body cameras. They weren't law enforcement. They weren't HOA staff. They weren't even brave criminals. They were amateurs pretending to be something dangerous. "Last warning, lady," the second man barked. "Unlock the car." The taller one raised a baton from his belt, tapping it against the window with growing impatience. Emily saw his shoulders tense, the telltale sign he was about to strike. She made her move. Her hand slid into the glove box just as the baton smashed against the glass, spiderwebbing the surface with a loud crack. Emily didn't scream. She didn't jerk. She didn't freeze. She retrieved what she needed, a legally carried weapon she was fully trained to use, and positioned herself with perfect precision. The moment the man drew back his baton for a second strike, Emily opened her door an inch, stepped out, and fired a warning shot into the asphalt. The sound exploded across the street, echoing through the neighborhood like a thunderbolt. Both fake officers jumped backward in pure shock, stumbling, arms flailing. The baton dropped to the ground with a clatter. The flashlight rolled toward the curb. Suddenly, they weren't confident anymore. Suddenly, they weren't powerful. Suddenly, they weren't in control. Emily rose to her full height, calm but commanding, her stance firm and trained. Her voice was steady, steady enough to make both men freeze in place. "Step away from my vehicle," she said. Now, the men looked at each other, terrified. This wasn't how their ambush was supposed to go. They expected a victim, not a warrior. They expected tears, not a tactical response. They expected obedience, not dominance. Before they could react, headlights appeared at the far end of the street. A neighbor had called 911 after hearing shouting, and now real police cars rolled in with purpose. Sirens off, but lights flashing blue. The fake cops panicked instantly. When the first patrol officer stepped out and saw Emily, recognition lit his eyes. "Ma'am? Emily? Are you all right?" he asked with genuine concern. That was the moment everything changed. The fake HOA cops froze, realizing too late who she was. A certified tactical instructor who trained real officers. The wrong woman, the wrong target, the wrong night. That was the moment the ambush fell apart. Long before Emily's ambush happened, the two men who stopped her had been practicing their act on dozens of neighbors, some elderly, some new residents, some simply unlucky enough to drive home at the wrong time. They were not professionals. They were not law enforcement. They were cowards dressed in Halloween-level uniforms, using fake authority to squeeze fear out of people who didn't know any better. But on the surface, they looked convincing enough to fool a hurried driver or a nervous homeowner. Their names were Blake and Troy, though they rarely used them on the job. Instead, they introduced themselves as Officer Hale and Officer Grant, flashing badges they bought online and speaking in the clipped, rehearsed tone they believed real cops used. Their SUV was the same, not a police vehicle, but a repainted security company truck with cheap light bars slapped on top. Up close, everything about them was wrong. The patches were crooked, the fonts didn't match, the boots weren't regulation, and their radio earpieces weren't even connected to anything. But from a distance, under dim lights, rushing traffic, or a frightened mind, the illusion held long enough to intimidate and thaw. T-illusion was exactly what Karen depended on. Karen, the HOA president, was the architect of the entire scheme. She sat at the top of the neighborhood like a self-appointed dictator, wearing her bright green blazer and carrying a clipboard as if it gave her divine authority. Her rules were endless. Her fines were ridiculous. Her attitude was unbearable. But her biggest weapon wasn't her voice or her authority. It was fear. And fear was something she manufactured very well. Karen had discovered long ago that most people didn't question uniforms. They didn't challenge badges. They didn't argue with lights and commands. So when she wanted to enforce her illegal compliance fees, she didn't send letters. She didn't knock on doors politely. She hired Blake and Troy instead. Two men who wanted easy money and didn't care how they got it. She trained them in her living room over cheap pizza and soda, lecturing them like a coach preparing a team for a crime they were too stupid to understand fully. She told them how to speak, how to act, how to intimidate. She explained that most residents wouldn't fight back because HOA officers were treated like neighborhood police. She assured them the fines were real enough to scare people, and if anyone resisted, they were to threaten escalation. We can take this to the county, or this will become a legal issue, or her favorite lie, failure to comply, may result in property suspension. For months, it worked. Dozens of homeowners paid the bogus fees. Hundreds of dollars turned into thousands. Fear replaced common sense, and Karen grew bolder. Blake and Troy also grew sloppy. Their confidence inflated far faster than their intelligence. They began stopping people who didn't even live in the HOA. They pulled over delivery drivers, landscapers, teenagers, even a teacher on her way to work. Anyone was a target if it meant Anotha. Our envelope of cash for Karen's enforcement fund. They practiced their lines in the mirror. They bought larger vests. They even started carrying airsoft guns painted black, believing it made them look more official. But they had weaknesses, fatal ones. They didn't know actual law. They didn't know real police procedure. They didn't understand the risk of picking the wrong person on the wrong night. By the time they chose Emily, they were arrogant enough to think they were unstoppable. They had watched her for a week, twice passing her on their patrol loop, twice noting she drove alone, and once following her home for 2 full blocks. Blake wrote her license plate number in a notebook. Troy rehearsed what he would say. They assumed she was tired, distracted, harmless. To them, she was just another homeowner they could scare into paying a non-compliance road fee. What they didn't know was that Emily had noticed them too. She noticed the mismatched vests, the unprofessional spacing of the decals, the lack of bumper numbers, the absence of a scanner in their car, the way they watched her instead of the road. She had felt the prickle of danger before. She had learned to listen to it. Her instincts weren't guesses. They were muscle memory built from years of tactical experience. She saw what others would miss. She sensed when something was wrong long before most people understood they were in danger. The night of the ambush, Blake and Troy thought they were fully in control. In reality, they were already unraveling. They didn't communicate with each other properly. They didn't coordinate their movements. They didn't even pay attention to their surroundings. They were too focused on Emily, trying to look professional while failing miserably. Blake gripped his baton too tightly, revealing nerves hidden beneath fake authority. Troy's flashlight trembled slightly. EA. Chime. He tapped Emily's windshield. They didn't see the neighbor walking her dog down the street. They didn't notice the security camera on a garage across from them. They didn't realize their SUV partially blocked the view of the main intersection. They didn't know Emily had already taken a mental note of escape angles, distances, and blind spots. To an untrained eye, the scene looked like a tense confrontation. To Emily, it looked like 2 imposters pretending to play cop. Karen had told them they were unbeatable. Karen had told them no one would fight back. Karen had told them everyone feared HOA authority. That lie was the thread that would end everything. In their minds, the script was simple. Block Emily's car, demand her ID, cite her for a fake violation, threaten escalation, take the money, but Emily didn't follow their script. Emily wrote her own. When she fired the warning shot that shattered the night air, Blake's entire persona fell apart. He stumbled backward, eyes wide, shouting something incoherent. Troy dropped his flashlight and tripped over his own boots. The confidence Karen had inflated in them evaporated instantly. They were no longer officers. They were just 2 criminals caught in a game they never should have played. And somewhere blocks away, a neighbor hit send on her phone and dialed the real 911, a call that would begin the end of everything Karen built. Emily wasn't the weakest link they targeted. She was the strongest. And Blake and Troy had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Emily had survived worse moments in her life. She had faced real danger in real situations, moments where hesitation meant disaster. So when the baton cracked her window and the fake officer's voice rose in aggression, she didn't crumble, she didn't scream, she didn't freeze. She simply felt something inside her settle, a deep, sharp fock. Us that clicked into place like a switch being flipped. Fear faded. Instinct rose. Her breathing slowed to a controlled rhythm, and the world around her sharpened as if someone twisted the lens of reality into perfect clarity. The first hit against the window sent tiny shards of tempered glass cascading across her lap. The cracks spread like lightning across the surface, but the window didn't shatter completely. Emily didn't move. She kept her hands still on her steering wheel, watching the man outside with a calmness that confused him. He expected fear. Instead, her stillness made him angrier. "Open the door," he shouted again, raising the baton higher. She didn't open it. She didn't respond. She just watched. Through the spider-webbed glass, she saw his eyes, darting, unfocused, unsure. He wasn't in control, he was pretending. And the more she stayed calm, the more his mask slipped. The other fake officer had moved from her front bumper to her passenger side, pacing back and forth in a jittery line. His flashlight beam shook with each step. They were getting nervous. They sensed this wasn't going like the others. The baton lifted again. Emily saw his shoulders tense, elbows lock. His weight shifted to his back leg, the telltale sign he was preparing a full-strength strike. That was the moment she moved. Her right hand dropped from the steering wheel and dipped into the glove box in one smooth, practiced motion. The lid opened silently, almost politely, her fingers wrapped around the grip of her firearm. Not shaking, not fumbling, not rushed. It was a movement she had practiced thousands of times, a movement muscle memory executed flawlessly even under pressure. The baton came down. Emily's door flew open at the same moment. The sudden force stunned the attacker. The open door knocked him off balance, sending him stumbling 2 steps backward. Before he could recover, before he could even process what happened, Emily stepped out of the car, not shaking, not crying, not pleading, standing, strong, controlled. Her stance was low, balanced, perfect, knees soft, shoulders aligned, grip solid, arms steady. Every inch of her posture radiated absolute command. She didn't aim the weapon at them. She didn't need to. She pointed it at the ground directly beside her and fired. The warning shot exploded like thunder, slamming through the quiet neighborhood with terrifying clarity. The asphalt sparked where the bullet struck, dust lifting into the air, birds launched from nearby trees, porch lights flickered on in the distance. The 2 fake cops flinched violently, jumping backward as if the shot had ripped through the air just for them. The baton hit the pavement with a hollow clatter. The flashlight rolled into the street, spinning until it finally stopped against a curb. For the first time all night, Blake, the taller one, showed his real face, and it wasn't bravery. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hands trembled. His eyes darted from the gun to Emily's expression, searching for a weakness he could not find. Troy, on the other hand, nearly toppled backward over his own boots. He grabbed at the SUV's mirror to steady himself, his breath coming in panic gasps. His fake badge bounced wildly against his vest. The confidence he wore earlier had dissolved completely. Emily didn't shout. She didn't threaten. Her voice came out quiet, steady as steel. "Step away from my vehicle." Blake nodded without hesitation, stumbling backward with both hands raised. Troy swallowed hard and followed, fear spreading across his face like spilled ink. They were no longer pretending to be tough. They didn't even look like men anymore, just scared boys caught in a game too big for them. Emily kept her weapon angled safely downward, her finger off the trigger, her stance ready but not aggressive. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't emotional. She was measured, the way a properly trained person should be. "Who sent you?" she asked. Neither answered. Blake's jaw trembled. Troy's eyes flicked toward their SUV, the classic sign of someone considering escape. Emily shifted slightly, her steps deliberate, cutting off the angle they needed. They weren't getting back in that vehicle. "You're impersonating law enforcement," Emily continued, "and you just attempted a forced entry on my car. That alone will put you in jail for a long time." The street was so quiet she could hear their breathing, fast, ragged, uneven. Troy stuttered. "Look, we didn't think you'd—" "You didn't think," Emily interrupted sharply. "Start getting used to that being part of the police report." At that exact moment, a distant siren echoed. Blake's head snapped toward the intersection. Troy's panic doubled. They knew what was coming. Real officers, real badges, real authority, real consequences. Emily kept her stance calm as the sirens grew louder, then quieter as the units cut them to avoid startling a dangerous situation. 2 patrol cars slid into view from opposite ends of the street, boxing in the SUV. Lights flashed across the pavement in a halo of red and blue. Blake's hands shook violently now. Troy was whispering to himself, a pathetic attempt at staying calm. The first officer stepped out of the nearest patrol car, one hand on his duty belt, but posture relaxed. When he saw Emily, his eyes widened slightly, not in alarm, but in recognition. "Ma'am," he called gently. "Emily, are you okay?" Her head dipped in a calm nod. I'm fine. The moment the fake cops heard that, her name spoken with respect, their faces transformed from panic to horror. They had chosen the wrong target, the worst possible target, the Officer Khan. Continued, ma'am, are these the suspects? Yes, Emily said simply. They attempted to stop my vehicle by impersonating HOA police and breaking my window. Real police moved fast. Fake police fell apart even faster. As officers approached Blake and Troy, both dropped to their knees without being asked. Hands shot into the air. Voices broke into pleas. Their entire fake persona shattered in seconds. Emily holstered her weapon slowly, safely, professionally, and for the first time since the ambush began, she exhaled. She hadn't been afraid, not once, because she knew something they never did. She was never the prey. She was the storm they didn't see coming. The neighborhood was usually silent at this hour, but the aftermath of Emily's warning shot sent ripples of noise through every street. Porch lights flicked on, curtains shifted, dogs barked behind fences. A neighbor standing by her driveway, phone still in hand, watched with wide eyes as she whispered hurriedly to the 911 operator. She kept glancing at Emily as if unsure whether she was witnessing a crime or someone preventing one. Emily remained still, steady, and alert. The barrel of her weapon pointed safely downward as she stood between the fake officers and her car. When the police cruisers finally turned onto the street, they didn't come in hot. They didn't screech to a stop or draw weapons. They approached with calculated control, the kind real officers used when they didn't know if they were arriving at a domestic dispute, a violent ambush, or something worse. The flashing red and blue lights painted the houses in eerie colors, reflecting off windows and trembling across Emily's cracked windshield. Blake and Troy turned toward the patrol cars like trapped animals, their faces twisted with the kind of panic that didn't belong to men in uniform, even fake ones. Troy's breath hitched, audible even from St. steps away. Blake muttered something under his breath, something like, we're screwed, but the words were too broken to be clear. The moment the officers stepped out, both fake cops lifted their hands, desperate to look compliant. The first officer approached cautiously, one hand on his belt, the other assessing the scene. His flashlight swept over the shattered glass. Emily's stance, the dropped baton lying beside the curb, and the cheap patches on the fake officers' vests. He didn't point his weapon, because everything in Emily's posture told him she was not the threat. Ma'am, he called gently, angled slightly to keep both suspects in his peripheral vision. Emily, are you all right? Emily lowered her weapon smoothly, slid it back into her holster, and nodded once. I'm fine, officer. That single exchange, her name, his tone, their familiarity, caused Blake and Troy's fear to spike into full-blown terror. They looked between Emily and the officer like someone had swapped the script without warning. Nothing about this was going the way they'd rehearsed. They expected a frightened homeowner crying in her car. They expected someone apologizing for resisting their authority. They expected submission. Instead, the real police recognized her instantly. The officer turned toward Blake and Troy. You two, don't move. Hands where I can see them. Troy stammered. She pulled a gun on us. Emily didn't even blink. The officer didn't either. Sir, the officer said flatly, you're wearing a plastic badge. That broke whatever courage Troy had left. His legs buckled slightly, and he dropped to his knees, hands still shaking above his head. Blake followed a second later, mumbling a series of excuses that didn't form real sentences. 2 more patrol cars arrived, their lights flashing across the neighborhood like a warning to stay inside. A Sergia. NT stepped out of the last unit, tall, confident, the kind of presence that changed the entire energy of a scene. He approached with calm authority, reviewing the situation with one sweeping glance. When his eyes landed on Emily, the stern expression melted into familiarity. Emily, he said, walking toward her. You're involved? Yes, she replied, stepping back slightly to give him a clear view of the suspects. They attempted a fake stop, broke my window, tried to force entry. The sergeant nodded once, jaw tight. Understood. Then he turned to the fake officers, and his tone transformed into steel. So, he said slowly, you 2 geniuses thought impersonating police was a smart idea? Blake shook his head rapidly. No, sir, this isn't. Karen told us. We thought this wasn't. The sergeant raised an eyebrow. Karen? As in the HOA president Karen? That single sentence made Emily's eyes narrow. She knew Karen was controlling, dramatic, and obsessed with power, but this, fake cops ambushing drivers, it was worse than she thought. Troy opened his mouth. We didn't mean to. The sergeant cut him off sharply. Save it. You're under arrest. Two officers moved in, cuffing the men as they whined and protested. The plastic badges clattered to the ground. Their vests sagged awkwardly. Everything about them, the boots, the gear, the fake patches, looked more ridiculous by the second under the bright police lights. Every scrap of authority they believed they had evaporated the moment Emily stood her ground. As the officers read them their rights, neighbors slowly emerged from their homes, forming small clusters along the sidewalks. Whispered conversations floated through the air. Those guys stopped me last week. I knew something felt off. Isn't that Emily, the tactical instructor? I heard she trains police. They picked the wrong woman. The surge. Ant motioned for Emily to step aside with him. Walk me through everything, he said. She did, calmly, precisely, with every detail correct. She explained how they cut her off, how they demanded she exit the vehicle, how one broke her window, how she responded with a legal weapon and a warning shot. Her voice stayed steady, her wording professional. The sergeant listened, nodding, occasionally glancing at the arrested men who were now sitting on the curb, cuffed and humiliated. You handled this better than most officers would have, he said finally. We'll file this properly. You did everything by the book. Emily simply nodded. She didn't smile. She didn't brag. She wasn't proud. She was tired of people abusing authority, tired of Karen's behavior, tired of seeing fear used as a weapon. As the fake cops were loaded into the patrol car, Blake tried one last desperate plea. It's not our fault. Karen told us to do it. We were just doing our job. You have to believe us. She made us. The sergeant paused at the door. Then she'll answer for it. Emily felt a familiar spark ignite inside her chest. This wasn't over. Not even close. Karen had crossed a line so deeply that even the HOA board wouldn't be able to protect her. Emily knew the investigation would lead straight to her front door, and when it did, the truth would hit harder than any warning shot. For now, though, the night ended with two criminals in custody, a neighborhood finally understanding the danger they'd been living under, and the real police treating Emily with the respect she earned. The ambush was over. But the war with Karen was just beginning. The fake officers were taken away that night, but the damage they caused didn't disappear with the sound of the patrol cars. Fear still lingered in the neighborhood like smoke after a fire. People hovered on their porches long after the police left, whispering to each other, pointing at Emily's cracked window, and wondering how something like this could happen in a quiet suburb. Emily didn't stay outside much longer. She returned home, closed the door, and finally let out the sigh she'd been holding for an hour. She wasn't shaken, she rarely was, but she finally allowed herself to feel the weight of exhaustion. She knew tonight was only the spark. The real fire was still coming. By the next morning, the incident had become the #1 topic spreading through the HOA. Neighbors posted videos, doorbell camera footage, screenshots from the street, and everything they recorded that night. People were outraged, confused, terrified, and most of all, embarrassed. Some realized they had let those fake officers bully them for months. Others admitted they had paid bogus compliance fees because they were scared. A few even told Emily they felt stupid for believing those two were real police. She didn't judge them. Fear makes people trust the wrong voices. The police department wasted no time digging into the two men's backgrounds. Blake and Troy were questioned separately, but their stories crumbled at the same speed. Within an hour, both broke under pressure. They weren't strong criminals, they weren't strategists, they weren't masterminds. They were exactly what Emily had seen them as from the moment she stepped out of her car. Two amateurs pretending to be wolves. Blake cracked first. He confessed everything, where they bought the uniforms, how long they'd been doing fake stops, which residents they targeted, and, most importantly, who hired them. He named Karen within the first 15 minutes, not once, not twice, but repeatedly insisting the entire operation was her idea. He said she coached them, paid them, and even rehearsed lines with them to sound more official. Troy's confession matched Blake's Almo perfectly. He admitted they were told to prioritize women, elderly residents, and new homeowners, anyone who wouldn't argue. He admitted they were told to cite violations that didn't exist. He admitted Karen created the compliance fees herself, insisting they were as good as law. He even revealed that Karen threatened to fire them if they appeared weak or let someone talk back. The investigators were stunned. Fake cops were one thing. A whole system of fake enforcement? That was something far darker. By lunchtime, officers requested a warrant for Karen's home and HOA office. By evening, they had it. When they entered her home the next morning, they walked into a shrine of self-made power. Her living room walls were filled with framed certificates, many outdated, some printed on cheap paper, and a few completely fabricated. Filing cabinets overflowed with envelopes marked fees, violations, and due immediately. But the most incriminating pieces were in a box under her desk, labeled training materials. Inside were scripts. If the homeowner questions your authority, remind them of the contract. Use stern tone. Don't smile. If they seem scared, continue. Fear helps with compliance. Mention escalation. Most people won't risk it. There were also printed badges, patches, forged paperwork, and receipts for fake uniforms purchased online. The evidence didn't just link Karen to the fake officers. It painted her as the mastermind of a small, corrupt machine that preyed on her entire neighborhood. News of the raid spread fast. Emily watched from her front window as police cars filled the street, their lights flashing silently in the daylight. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks with their arms crossed, shaking their heads, asking each other the same stunned question. How did we not see this coming? Emily knew the answer. Karen built her power on intimidation and manipulation, not laws, not truth, not real authority, and fear is a powerful blinder. That afternoon, the police asked Emily to come in to give an official statement. She walked into the station quietly, greeted officers she had trained years earlier, and sat across from the detective leading the case. He thanked her for staying calm, for defending herself correctly, and for providing such a clear account. He confirmed what she already suspected. Karen was deeply involved, more than anyone imagined. Then he leaned back and said something Emily wouldn't forget. This wasn't just impersonation. This was organized intimidation. Karen created her own shadow police force. Emily let those words settle in the air. She wasn't surprised. She had felt for months that the HOA wasn't just strict, it was controlled by fear. And now she knew why. The detective continued. We're filing charges for impersonating law enforcement, false detainment, breaking and entering, harassment, fraud, extortion, maybe more. We still need to search the rest of her files. Emily nodded. She wasn't the type to celebrate justice early. She knew cases like this took time. But this time, the evidence was overwhelming. By sunset, Karen herself was brought into the station for questioning, escorted in handcuffs, wearing the same green blazer she strutted around in like a symbol of authority. But tonight, it didn't look powerful. It looked pathetic. She tried to hide her face from neighbors, but whispers chased her. Is that Karen? I can't believe she did this. She endangered all of us. Inside the interrogation room, she attempted denial first. I don't know those men. I never hired them. They acted on their own. But when detectives laid the training scripts, fake badges, payment records, and Blake's and Troy's confessions on the table, her confidence collapsed. She went pale. Her hands shook, her lips trembled, and for the first time since the HOA began terrorizing the community, Karen lost her voice. You don't understand, she finally whispered. I was keeping order. The HOA needed authority. People weren't respecting the rules. The detective's reply was ice cold. You don't get to create your own police. Karen's silence after that was the closest thing to guilt Emily had ever seen from her. When word reached Emily, she didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply sat down at her dining table, exhaled slowly, and allowed herself a moment of peace. The truth was out. The lies were collapsing, and the whole neighborhood finally understood what had really been happening behind the scenes. Karen had always walked through the neighborhood like she owned it. Her green blazer flashed across driveways, HOA meetings, sidewalks, and doorsteps like a warning sign. She criticized garden lengths, mailbox colors, driveway cracks, and even children's toys left outdoors for more than 12 minutes. She believed she was untouchable, that power lived in paperwork, threats, and her voice louder than reason. But when she entered the courthouse 2 weeks after the ambush, she didn't look powerful at all. She looked small. Her wrists were cuffed. Her hair was a tangled mess of denial and fear. Her blazer was wrinkled, no longer a symbol of authority, but a reminder of how much she had abused it. Emily watched her silently from a bench near the back of the room. She didn't come to taunt Karen or revel in her downfall. She came because justice needed a witness, and Emily had been at the center of the storm that exposed every rot in the system. The courtroom filled quickly. Neighbors, homeowners, elderly residents, mothers with children who had been stopped and scared by fake cops, all came to see the truth unfold. Some hugged Emily before taking their seats. Some whispered their thanks. Some simply nodded with tearful eyes. For once, the community wasn't divided by HOA rules. They were united by relief. When the judge entered, everyone rose. Karen didn't lift her head. She stared at the table, avoiding the eyes she once bullied so confidently. Her lawyer whispered to her rapidly. Papers spread everywhere, but Karen's hands shook too badly to hold them. The prosecutor began laying out the case. Methodically, piece by piece, he detailed the fake uniforms, the fake stops, the illegal fees, the intimidation. Then he dropped the bombshell, the training scripts Karen wrote in her own handwriting, documents so incriminating the courtroom gasped. She created a shadow enforcement unit, the prosecutor said. She weaponized fear. She endangered residents. She ordered 2 untrained men to impersonate officers and approach citizens on public roads. Karen's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed the statement. The truth was too heavy to hide behind technicalities. Blake A. and Detroit testified next, appearing on video screens because they were already in detention. Their faces looked hollow, stripped of ego. They admitted everything again, but this time in front of the judge. We did what she told us, Blake said quietly. She said the HOA needed control. She said people would listen to badges better than letters. Troy added, she wanted fear. She wanted people scared of her. In the gallery, several homeowners wiped their eyes. Emily felt a tightness in her chest, not from sadness, but from the confirmation of what she had sensed for months. Karen hadn't just wanted order, she wanted obedience. Blind obedience. When the judge asked if Emily would like to speak, the courtroom fell silent as she stood. Emily walked to the front, her posture strong and steady, the way she stood the night she faced the fake officers. She didn't exaggerate or dramatize. She didn't need to. Her voice carried with calm conviction. I didn't fire my weapon to hurt anyone, she said. I fired it to protect myself from people who should never have been given authority. Real police are trained, disciplined, and held accountable. These men weren't officers. They were tools Karen used to scare this community into compliance. She created danger where there was none, and she put every resident at risk. She turned slightly toward Karen, not accusingly, but with the clarity of someone who had faced the truth head on. You didn't build safety, Emily said. You built fear. Karen didn't raise her eyes. Her lawyer squeezed her shoulder, but she still wouldn't look up. The weight of her choices pressed down like a stone. After Emily spoke, the judge took a long breath. He didn't yell. He didn't show anger. His tone was quiet, steady, and absolute. This, he said, tapping the stack of evidence on his desk, is one of the most disturbing abuses of neighborhood authority. Thank you, I have ever seen. HOA powers are limited and designed to protect property, not to control citizens through fear, impersonation, or deception. You created a false police force. You manipulated residents. You endangered lives, and you nearly caused a tragedy. Karen finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling. She tried to speak, but no sound came. The judge delivered the verdict, multiple felony charges, forgery, impersonation of law enforcement, conspiracy to commit fraud, reckless endangerment, coercion, and harassment. Karen collapsed back into her chair with a soft sob. As deputies escorted her out, she passed Emily. Their eyes met, only for a moment, and in Karen's gaze, Emily saw everything: regret, confusion, disbelief, and the crushing realization that she had destroyed herself. Emily didn't respond. She didn't glare or smile. She simply stepped aside, letting justice move forward without interference. The HOA board members met immediately after the sentencing. Within 20 minutes, Karen was permanently removed from all positions, her name scrubbed from every document. Residents voted unanimously to dissolve the enforcement unit, delete all unlawful fines, and begin an audit of every policy she ever created. When Emily walked outside the courthouse, the sun was bright. The breeze felt clean. Several neighbors gathered around her, thanking her, hugging her, telling her the neighborhood finally felt safe again. A few apologized for ever believing Karen's authority. One elderly woman held Emily's hands and whispered, "You protected all of us. We won't forget it." Emily smiled softly. "I just did what anyone should do," she said. But they knew better. Not everyone would have stood strong. Not everyone would have stayed calm. Not everyone would have fought back against fear. That night, as Emily sat on her porch with a cup of tea, neighborhood lights flickering peacefully around her, she finally felt the tension leave her body. The danger was gone. The lies were gone. The threat had been dismantled completely. The world was quiet again, and everyone knew one truth: if you mess with Emily, you mess with the wrong family.